Hello, my name is Roberto Martinez Maldonado, and I'm going to present our paper, Teacher Tracking with Integrity, what indoor positioning can reveal about instructional proxemics in behalf of my co-authors. We all know that indoor positioning tracking is becoming widely spread using different wearables and computer vision systems, and they are becoming really, really accurate. However, not much research has been done on how we can make this positioning data available for end users. So we're particularly focusing on the teachers, how teachers can use the data to learn to move in the classroom more effectively. At the moment, they learn many times from teaching guides that recommend how they need to move in the classroom, or from peers, other teachers that observe the movements and then provide feedback. However, in both of these cases, there are shortcomings for the teaching guides. There is not enough evidence that strongly supports these recommendations, and they are not useful for self-reflection because they don't promote the use of the own data. And for peer teaching, it's costly, hard to scale up, and is also susceptible to personal bias. So we selected 3 different learning contexts. One was a typical classroom, actually led by one teacher. Another one was a specialized learning space or nursing simulation when one teacher is looking after different teams, and a physics lab when we have 2 teachers and several students doing lots of experiments. So the contribution of this paper is a qualitative study that is inspecting the reflections of teachers provoked by visual representations of their classroom positioning data in these 3 different contexts. As you can see, the floor plans, we equip each of these systems with an indoor positioning tracking system, POSIX.io, and the teachers were asked to wear this label in the form of a badge. And the 3 research questions that we are addressing include identifying the added value of making this positioning data visible for teachers, their anticipated uses, and how this can impact their own practice if we share this data with other stakeholders. So the method that we employed was to using teachers' own data and the data from other teachers in the classes in the form of heat maps of the X and Y coordinates at the end of the class, and also divided into quartiles. We also had open-ended interviews focusing on identifying what is being made visible through the positioning data, how would they use the data, and the implications of showing this data to others, which match our research questions. So these were some examples of the visibility aspects of the data. This is in the context of the simulation classrooms. So we have 2 teachers, in this case, one teacher on the left that usually was in point A where the computer is, and then close to each of the beds where the students are. And we have a totally different strategy followed by a different teacher in the same space, pretty much standing where you see the point C and the middle of the class instead of being close to the students. So it's interesting what each teacher commented on each other once they look at each other's data. So for example, this one said, I never seen how this other teacher is conducting the classes, so it would be good to share this data with other teachers. And the other one justified his behaviors by pointing out limitations of the space that is limiting the mobility and how he can position himself in between the beds. In a different setting, in this case, the science lab, the dots in gray are the experiment locations where the students pretty much are. Each dot represents a group of students. And we can see that the teacher, in this case, was very close to each of these dots, in contrast to this other teacher on the right, where you can see it's pretty much covering the whole floor plan, but not necessarily being all the time close to the groups. So when the coordinator looked at these diagrams, he explained that this is a helpful teacher on the left because he's close to the students. And on the other side, it was using the word, this is a supervisory behavior. So I would instruct this teacher to be closer and helping more to the students, spending more time with the students. So when we ask them more specifically about what would be the envisaged use of this data, they, of course, talk about self-reflection support and the opportunity to facilitate team meetings as a debriefing tool and to explain at a high level what is expected from each of the teachers. And also, they envisage the use of this data for training of his teachers or identifying good exemplars of very experienced teachers that can be then shared with the novice teachers. When they were asked about the opportunities for real-time support, obviously they said, yeah, it would be good to immediately take action based on these traces, but this is a design space where the different ways in which this data can be presented can become a distraction as well. So it needs to be a subtle signal if they really need to do something. And in terms of interior design, they suggested that these data can be useful for assessing the effectiveness of a learning space, but they were also concerned about some stakeholders that are not necessarily imbued in the educational principles that they can make decisions about the architecture without consulting the teachers. In terms of accountability, there were concerns from the teachers on being assessed summatively on their performance based on these limited data. So they suggested that this data should only be used for providing formative feedback and for the purpose of improving practice. So in this, we invite you to read our paper, which is aimed at coming from low-level X and Y positioning data to improving practice with integrity. And that's why we have this word in our title, because according to one of the principles of use of educational data, we shouldn't use this kind of analytics to monitor staff performance. Thank you very much. If you have any question, please send us a message.